Victorian England is often imagined as a world of stiff collars, quiet parlors, lace curtains, and overly polite small talk. But behind that facade existed a society full of contradictions, fear, misunderstanding, and unusual beliefs about the body. For many people of the era, daily life was ruled by strict moral codes, complicated anxieties, and bizarre medical advice that would feel strange, even frightening, to modern minds. If you're listening to this to fall asleep, the slow rhythm of these strange customs, once considered normal, will carry you gently backward through time, into a world where even the simplest human feelings were tangled in superstition and social pressure. Victorians were obsessed with self-control. They believed that a person's moral strength could be seen in their behavior, their posture, and even the smallest habits of daily life. Anything natural or emotional was treated with suspicion, especially when it came to the body. Even discussing it was considered improper. Doctors used vague words, couples were expected to remain silent about private life, and young people were often raised without understanding what marriage even meant. This lack of knowledge created confusion, fear, and a collection of strange practices that Victorians believed were necessary to protect their health or their dignity. What seems terrifying to us now often came from the era's struggle to balance science, morality, and the heavy weight of tradition. One of the most unsettling practices involved the way Victorians tried to cure natural human emotions. Many doctors believed that too much excitement of any kind could drain a person's strength or shorten their life. Young men were warned that even daydreaming too much could ruin their health. Pamphlets were printed claiming that people could go blind from improper thoughts. This terrified entire generations into living with constant anxiety, always worried that a normal, harmless feeling might secretly destroy them. In boarding schools, teachers sometimes inspected students at night or tied their hands to the bed to prevent any unwholesome habits. While this sounds almost unbelievable today, to Victorians it was seen as righteous guidance, meant to protect fragile bodies from imaginary dangers. Some brides entered marriage without even knowing what it involved, because their mothers believed innocence meant purity. When the truth finally came, it was not explained gently. Instead, many were left frightened and confused, unsure whether something normal was actually something shameful. Doctors often refused to explain anything clearly, using vague phrases like marital duty or wifely submission, assuming the less a woman understood, the better. This lack of knowledge created widespread fear, and many Victorian women spent their early married years believing something was wrong with them simply because no one had ever told them otherwise. Medical treatments of the era could be even more alarming. Victorian doctors believed that nearly every emotional or physical issue in women came from their reproductive organs. If a woman was sad, tired, overwhelmed, or anxious, doctors diagnosed her with hysteria, a catch-all term that had little real medical meaning. The treatments for hysteria ranged from long, unnecessary bed rest to frightening surgical interventions that would be considered unethical today. Many women who simply needed rest, nutrition, understanding, or emotional support instead found themselves subjected to procedures based on out-of-date theories. In some cases, their husbands made the decisions for them, because women had almost no control over their own medical care. For men, the situation wasn't much better. Some doctors convinced their patients that their life energy was easily drained and needed to be preserved at all costs. This led to a strange market of devices, belts, and contraptions designed to protect male vitality. Many of these devices were uncomfortable, sometimes painful, and often made from metal. Advertisements claimed these inventions would prevent weakness, but in truth, they only caused anxiety and physical discomfort. Imagine wearing a complicated, heavy contraption under your clothing every day, out of fear that the slightest natural impulse might ruin your health. It was a quiet kind of misery, wrapped in the language of medical science, and accepted by frightened young men who had never been taught anything more accurate. Marriage itself followed strict rules that sound chilling today. Victorians believed that husbands had authority over their wives in nearly every aspect of life. The law supported this belief, giving husbands near total control of household decisions. Wives could not refuse many expectations placed on them, and many felt it was their duty to endure whatever came. While some marriages were kind and loving, others were shaped by silence, pressure, and obligation. A wife who expressed discomfort could be dismissed as emotional, disobedient, or delicate. The social pressure to appear cheerful in public meant that many women carried their fears quietly, never speaking them aloud, even to friends. Privacy was rare, but judgment was everywhere. Communities watched one another closely, always ready to gossip about a couple's behavior, the number of children they had, or whether someone seemed too cheerful or too withdrawn. Women without children were whispered about, while women with too many were judged for being overly emotional. Men were scolded for being too gentle or too stern. Everyone lived under the feeling that their personal life was always being examined, compared, and evaluated according to impossible standards. Victorians held countless unusual beliefs about health. Cold air was thought to be dangerous, so people kept windows shut even in summer. Exercise was considered risky for women, so many spent long hours indoors, deprived of sunlight and fresh air. Doctors warned that too much reading could overstimulate the mind, causing restlessness or unhealthy daydreams. Even couples in marriage were sometimes told that too much closeness might weaken the body. These beliefs added layers of fear and guilt to normal life, turning natural human experiences into sources of worry. One of the most unsettling ideas of the era was the belief that a person's moral character could be seen in their physical features. Some Victorians believed that certain facial shapes or body types reflected hidden desires or weaknesses. This pseudoscience, called physiognomy, led people to judge one another based on appearance alone. A person with soft features might be accused of being too emotional. Someone with sharp features might be labeled cold or untrustworthy. These judgments could affect marriages, reputations, and even job opportunities. Imagine living in a world where the shape of your nose could determine what your neighbors thought of your character. Another troubling practice was the Victorian obsession with purity tests, especially for young women. These examinations were conducted by doctors or sometimes midwives, often without the woman's informed consent. They were based on flawed assumptions and caused deep emotional distress. Families believed these tests protected their daughters' reputations, but in reality, they only added fear, stigma, and shame to already fragile lives. Many women carried the trauma of these invasive examinations for years, never speaking of them because the subject itself was considered taboo. With all these strict rules and fears, it is no wonder that many Victorians led double lives, polite and proper in public, secretly anxious and confused in private. The era's contradictions created pressure that seeped quietly into every household. People often married young without understanding their own emotions, let alone the responsibilities of partnership. They were taught to suppress their feelings, avoid questions, and live according to rules that no one fully explained. The result was a society full of secrets, misunderstandings, and silent suffering. Yet beneath all this, the Victorians were also human beings doing their best within the limits of their world. Many couples found comfort in one another despite the silence surrounding them. Many women built networks of friendship to share advice cautiously, whispering truths in safe spaces away from judgmental eyes. Some doctors, ahead of their time, challenged outdated theories and advocated for better medical understanding. Change came slowly, but it did come. By the late Victorian period, education improved, medical science advanced, and public attitudes began to shift toward openness and empathy. Looking back now, these practices seem terrifying, not because of any dramatic events, but because of the quiet, suffocating pressure they placed on ordinary people. The fear of judgment, the lack of knowledge, the strange medical beliefs, and the rigid expectations combined to create a world where something as simple as emotion could feel dangerous. But history reminds us that societies evolve. What once seemed normal can later be recognized as harmful.